first forum of the Standing Committee on Finance. My name is Neeraj Prasad, and on behalf of the World Bank Institute, which you will see somewhere on the screen, it is my privilege to also welcome you to this meeting. It's been 6 months in the making, so we are very delighted to see all of you here and interacting, and hopefully this is of providing some inputs both to the Standing Committee members as well as to the participants who get a chance to interact with them either on the sort of official podium sequence or in the corridors or in the breaks. We really look forward to helping to do as much value addition as possible. In this session, I'm conscious of the fact that we are now way behind schedule, but we'll try and see if we can wrap this up by 1 o'clock. The idea in this discussion was to see whether, when you've heard all that you've heard this morning about the challenges to financing, about what is out there, what is happening, and what is needed, what are the drivers. We are trying to explore here what are the innovative approaches, the actual case studies on the ground that are delivering results in some way or the other. And what we have here is a fascinating, somewhat eclectic mix of representatives of finance. In the order that they will speak, I have first Ms. Mary Gomez-Torres from the CAF, the Latin American Development Bank. Suffice it to say, last year, I think it was in May, that the Financial Times spoke of CAF as doing more lending in Latin America than the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank combined. That should probably place the rest of us in the right perspective. We will just listen to what Mary has to say, and then we will nod our heads and agree with everything. We also have Avril from the Inter-American Development Bank, who will then explain how the IDB has been working in Latin America, and hopefully we'll get a sort of a case study or a flavor of how they've been engaging on the climate front. We will then have Mr. David Rogers from the Global Environment Facility, I beg your pardon. Having been on the first governing council, I shouldn't have made that mistake. Easily the largest grant mechanism available on climate finance from its inception until now, and we will try to get a feel from him of what has been the experience. And finally, we will hear from Mr. Mark Stewart from Allotrope Ventures. As he put it in the sort of warming up session we were having here, he's the only one in this room who's using his own money to finance climate activities. But it is an old school merchant bank. It's a private equity company which looks at projects and advisory services as well as some venture capital. So should be a very exciting 50 minutes. So we'll try and keep to about 7-8 minutes per speaker and go through 1 o'clock for whatever questions there are, and we have to stop exactly at 1. So without any further delay, can I invite Ms. Gomez-Torres? Please come.
Thank you so much for this invitation to CAF. CAF is a multilateral development bank of Latin America, and in the last 14 years we are working in climate finance. And what is our experience in terms of climate finance, and a specific case is the topic of my presentation. First of all, we relate that 14 years ago, the climate finance was no credible term in terms of the possibility of finance inside the bank. But we had to do a change in terms of the possibility of this type of financing in the bank. And actually, the possibility for this financing is more or less 34% of the portfolio of total investment in CAF, in loans and also in equity. And how CAF can do it. And we relate some tips of this change in the bank. First of all, we have a new assessment for the projects in CAF, and we improve this assessment, including the possibility for a climate lens in the reviewing of the projects. We have climate lens at the starting of the identification of the projects, and we have a new possibility in terms of specific financial products for climate investments. We can do it because we have a lot of partnerships with other banks. This was very important for CAF. We have a lot of products developed not only as CAF, but also with other partnerships, with other banks, with other developing banks that are working in terms of climate finance. This type of products has a very specific condition. No, it's only the design of the financial product. We are jointly to this type of products, we have knowledge products, and these knowledge products are working jointly with the financial product. Let me explain with a specific case. We have actually several lines, but I want to speak about one specific experience with KfW, one of our partnerships in terms of climate finance. This financial product is designed at the several levels. We have the level of the government, and in the government we direct some resources from the technical assistance of the European Union and KfW in order to establish a framework that secures the investment in a specific sector. We scale up the intervention to the specific sectors if the government has the commitment for change in a specific sector. And in terms of climate change, this is good because we have the possibility for aid to establish a specific regulation and a specific plan. And at the same time, we design the line in terms of the credits, the loans, and if it is possible, the possibility for credit for carbon credits, direct this specific financial product to the actors and the companies and the public sector that is working in this type of projects. And the second level, the actors, the companies, and the public sector that is working in the climate finance projects is another level of technical assistance. In the last presentations, we are some words are common. The political level, the framework for the political sector, and the risk. The risk is a very important issue in terms of the climate finance. The risk at all levels, the level of the political framework, the level of the companies, and in the companies we have some key important points. The private sector needs the possibility for understand these new technologies and the innovation of inside the new technologies. The appropriation of the new technologies is an important point in terms of the success of the projects. The private sector needs not only the knowledge for the new technology, but also understand the new the new type of investment, because this type of investment is linked to a new variable, the performance. And the performance in mitigation projects means reduce CO2. And this type of new enterprise is difficult at the starting of the projects. We need to establish credible MRBs because the financing is designed in terms of this performance. And this is a very different point, and we need technical assistance in order to transmit this knowledge to the companies. This possibility also is an important point of the design of the knowledge products linkage to the financial product. And at this moment, our challenge is to invest in adaptation projects. Adaptation projects has different drivers and for the investing. And adaptation projects has not only the driver of the regulation, but also the driver of planning. And planning is a new key aspect of the adaptation projects. And it's difficult because this driver is less understanding than mitigation projects. We have invest in adaptation projects, but less than mitigation projects. And really is a difficult area for financing in climate change. This is the challenge, and the future we expect to increase the investments in adaptation projects, and probably we have to design new tools for adaptation investments. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, the need for a comprehensive approach that takes into account all aspects of appraisal, if you will, and the challenges that will be coming. Thank you also for sticking to the time. Can I now invite Avril to make a few remarks from the perspective of the IDB?
Can you hear me? I don't
think
think
it'll
so.
come on. Yes.
Yeah, now you can hear me. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. I actually wanted to make a little modification to the fact that I work for the Inter-American Development Bank, but within the Inter-American Development Bank, I work for the Multilateral Investment Fund, which is actually a fund that was created in 1993, and we define ourselves as being the innovation laboratory of the bank because we take the risks that we're talking about today to try new business models that can afterwards hopefully be replicated and brought up to scale. So we actually, at the MIF, we focus at serving micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs going forward in the presentation, also microfinance institutions and NGOs. And when we talk about being a laboratory, it's because we actually invest mainly grants, but also loans and equity to develop these successful business cases. In the next 5 to 6 minutes, hopefully I'm going to present 4 main case studies that actually can highlight the type of things that we're doing in leveraging or bringing in finance for climate change mitigation and also a little bit of adaptation, a little touch. And actually, I'm going to also present how, at the MIF, we want to unlock private sector activity in clean energies and energy efficiency. So the 4 major case studies I'm going to highlight are going to start with, first of all, the FIP program. Actually, most of people of the attendants here are familiar with the Forest Investment Program, which actually has selected several countries in the world, and one of them is Mexico. And the MIF has just closed with the FIP, the first private sector-led program, which is kind of innovative because not only are we bringing private sector actors because we actually help them touch and reach these big financing pools. One of the panelists before were saying, where is all this money? Well, the MIF actually helps the private sector to get into these pools and use these funds to follow the mandates and the programs that have already been designed under the climate investment funds. So this project is actually important also because we have a local currency tranche in the financing. I can get into more detail later on because if not, I'm not going to have the time to explain all of the case studies, but that was actually the first time not only to have the private sector involved, but also to have a local currency tranche of the loan that could be directed to micro, small, and medium enterprises in Mexico for the FIP program. The second case study relates to what we are calling greening the supply chain of anchor companies. What we're seeing at the MIF is actually that not only big multinational companies or big private sector actors are emitting a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, emitting a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It's just that recent research suggests that in the supply chain of these big multinational companies, you can find that MSMEs emit between 40 to 80% of the whole company greenhouse gas emissions. So the MIF identified a project, or with the help, actually we are very much demand driven, so we were contacted by Walmart and FEMSA in Mexico to actually green the supply chain of these two companies in Mexico. And to do that, we wanted to provide loans, but also technical assistance to these MSMEs to invest in energy efficiency that will improve their competitiveness, but also reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly for the MSMEs, but also at the anchor company level. We hope that actually this type of projects are going to be replicated by other big multinational companies, and so that the impact, the mitigation impact, can be considerably high. The third case study, and the reason why I'm here today is because I am the program coordinator of a regional green microfinance program that is co-financed by the Multilateral Investment Fund and the Nordic Development Fund, and actually wants to do several things, not only the mitigation side, but in the adaptation side. First of all, the main goal is to train microfinance institutions to develop green finance products. How we define green finance products is actually the loans that can help the clients, so MSMEs and low-income people, to access clean energy and energy efficiency, but also green loans that we've called green for adaptation to climate change. We actually select our microfinance institutions through competitive regional selection processes, and last year we selected 4. Two are going to develop clean energy and energy efficiency products, but 2 others are going to do adaptation type of products that actually are going to respond to the needs of Bolivian people, MSMEs and low-income people, and to Nicaraguan people, for MSMEs also and low-income people. These facilities are important also because we're not only training the MFIs in providing these green finance products, but we're actually helping them assess the vulnerability of their loan portfolios to climate change, which actually is a good entry point to change the minds of the MFIs and the main financial institutions that actually want to provide and be great actors in clean energy and energy efficiency while understanding climate change overall. The fourth and final case study relates to private equity that I'm sure my colleague later on is going to touch on that a little bit more. And it's because the MIF also brings together private equity investors to actually invest in small and medium companies that are devoting their activities to mitigation, most of them mitigation activities. So since 1996, which was the first year in which we had a green fund, we have developed in total 10 funds investing more than $60 million in 59 micro, small, and medium enterprises. And we are proud to say that we just closed the Microcarbon Development Fund that has actually brought together partners like not only the European Investment Bank, but also other international climate funds like the GEF. And we are going to invest this $40 million in small-scale small-scale, low-carbon finance, and also energy efficiency. Finally, and I hope I'm still within my time, I wanted to mention that at the MIF, we also believe that in order to develop the private sector, we need to fill in the knowledge gaps. We fill in the knowledge gaps not only with the pilot projects that we do, and we do knowledge products after our pilot projects and the type of examples I just mentioned, but also by producing knowledge products per se. And I was happy this morning to hear the Minister of Nicaragua mention, and I brought it here, the climate scope. And the climate scope is a tool that was that is developed currently. The 2013 issue is going to hopefully be published in July. The climate scope is a report and a tool, because it's a tool that you can use online in order to map out the challenges and opportunities of investing, so for the private sector, in clean energy and energy efficiency in Latin America and the Caribbean. That's particularly important because we all mentioned here that we need to know about the ecosystems. What are the main frameworks that are in place? What are the policies that certain countries actually are putting in place and that are working? That's why Nicaragua actually was mentioning before. They are the number 3 for the 2012 issue, and it's because the combination of certain, actually 4 parameters and the indicators in which we evaluate our different countries can help us actually provide this tool and this report that can help the private sector invest in clean energy and energy efficiency. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will welcome
We'll take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
No, and thank you also for clarifying what specifically was the role of your organization within the IDB. It would be interesting to have a conversation when we go back to DC, because within the World Bank group, there is this thing called the World Bank Institute where we work and we do the capacity development work. And we thought that we were running the innovation conversation in Washington, DC. So it'll be nice. But the anchor model that you refer to is something that we have found has extremely high traction with microgrids as well. When we are working with telecom towers to see whether we can build up communities of energy supply around them in sub-Saharan Africa. And it'll be interesting to exchange notes in terms of innovations. But I'm conscious of the time that I'm taking away from the speakers. So shall we just move on to David? Have you found in the sort of programs supported by the GEF the examples of innovative climate financing that are worth discussing here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you to Stefan and Diane and the whole standing committee for organizing this forum. It's very impressive on the margins of the Carbon Expo with support from IETA and the World Bank Institute to have so many attendees here on this beautiful day. And the GEF is a proud investor in climate finance for over 20 years. But one of the challenges that we have faced is how do you describe the engagement with the private sector? And it's already been brought up this morning that if you try to speak of the private sector or climate finance as one thing, you miss the mark. So we've spent some time trying to articulate the ecosystem that we're working here. And with apologies to everyone who actually is in the private sector, let me share with you the way the GEF looks at this. And we see there's 3 fundamental categories of private sector players that we're engaging with at the GEF. These would be capital providers. We mentioned these earlier, the institutional investors, the folks with the money. Number 2, the financial intermediaries and facilitators, the banks and others who help make sure that that money is connected to good projects. And then, of course, you have the major industry players. But industry in itself is not monolithic. We have large corporate global multinationals and multinational corporations. We have SMEs. And then we have the individual entrepreneur and innovator. And one of the things that we've done at the GEF is looked at how we interact with these different players. And each player may require a different type of tool or a different type of mechanism for interaction. So one of the things we like to talk about is 4 different intervention models that we can use with these different levels of private sector players. As been mentioned this morning, supporting enabling policy environment. This is really fundamental to ensuring that private sector investors of all types feel comfortable going into a country and making an investment. So the GEF has supported over the years dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of projects to help promote the enabling policy environment. The second area of engagement is providing incremental financing. This can be simple things like a grant to do a technical demonstration, or it can be much more complicated, like a credit enhancement for risk reduction, or even an equity investment to help make up the difference between what's needed to make a particular project go forward. And the GEF, those two, enabling policy environment and incremental finance, are really the bread and butter of the GEF. But let's not neglect two other interventions. One has already been mentioned, are corporate alliances, where large companies come together to address significant issues. It could be greening the supply chain. It could be energy efficient lighting. It could be sustainable cocoa, sustainable coffee. These type of corporate alliances are very important for ensuring that companies come together and identify methodologies, standards, and applications that will then help steer and make private sector investments possible. And the fourth area, which has been already mentioned, but I think goes underutilized, and this would be capacity building, technical assistance, and incubation. Now, many folks know that the GEF invests in government capacity building, and this is very important. It doesn't help to pass a renewable feed-in tariff if the government doesn't have the regulatory capacity to implement it. But we also invest in capacity building and incubation for the small and micro-scale enterprise, so that those innovators know how to make their projects meet regulatory frameworks. So I want to just bring my comments to a close and say I could speak for hours with examples in each of these categories. But one of the areas that we know the GEF moving forward as we enter the GEF 6 replenishment cycle is we need to do more in each of these areas. We think risk reduction is critically important, as has been mentioned. We think aggregation of bank projects at the medium microscale sector into larger scale packages is very important. We'd like to see more corporate alliances, especially in the area of global commodities, as has been mentioned, where these global commodities are causing a significant amount of deforestation and climate emissions. And of course, we, as my friends and colleagues will talk about this afternoon, see the tremendous need for engagement with the private sector also on climate resiliency and adaptation. So thank you, Niraj, and look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Indeed, and we look forward to seeing some of these elements as a part of the new GF strategy, I guess, that's being rolled out this year as well. They're all very key sort of factors, and I think for members in the audience, hopefully you're getting to see the sort of the broader sort of snapshot of the various components that even multilaterals look at as we move forward with financing options. But to give it a slight switch, you've heard three speakers who've essentially spoken in the public domain. Let's hear from Mark Stewart about how this all comes together when he sees it from the perspective of the private sector. So we've deliberately asked him to go last, and he very happily consented. Mark, over to you.
Or to quote Monty Python, and now for something completely different. First of all, thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to chat here about what we're doing. As many of you in the room will know, I'm a refugee from the carbon market, and currently Allotrope Ventures, which is my company that I'm working with several colleagues, is basically a family, soon-to-be small multifamily office initiative, basically around making early-stage investments in low-carbon platforms. And what does that mean? Does that mean you were looking for carbon credits or credits? Like, no. We think that, that what the CDM basically and what the carbon market did over the years was uncover partially an enormous number of opportunities that right now, because of the confluence of technology advancement, resource instability, and enabling policy environments, are getting more and more attractive. When we look at where, for example, solar energy is compared to where it was even 5 years ago, it's breathtaking what has occurred, okay? And when we look at what's going on in batteries, what we look is going on in certain other technologies, these things are occurring well. So how do we take that and take the true needs that we know around the world around resource depletion and the need to provide goods and services to the world in a sustainable fashion? What needs to occur? And we've heard a lot today about sort of the top-down needs from governments and from international institutions to create supportive networks or supportive processes that allow us to buy down risk. And Abid and everybody else is completely right. It's all about risk and reward. And what we're doing at our level is extraordinarily high risk, and hopefully some of it's going to be extraordinarily high return. I fully expect that multiple investments we made, we are going to just write off and say, bad idea, oh well. But I'm hoping that a couple of them are those mythical 10x, 50x, 100xers that you get, because there's an important thing to realize here is that large institutions, corporations, or governments can only change things incrementally. They can't move that quickly, intrinsically. The only way you get step function changes where you really change the entire shape of a market, wherever that market is, and you can look at the history of virtually everything in the global economy, is via entrepreneurship and somebody coming in and saying, I'm going to try to do this in a different way. I'm going to try to find the permutation of, as I say, technology, capability, whatever it may be, to take a piece of this current market that is delivering a good or a service into the global economy. And so we're running around trying to make very, very early stage investments in this space. I'll just give a few examples. We and another private equity firm recently funded a gas flare reduction platform that's focused on West Africa. Why? Because there's an enormous amount of gas flaring in West Africa. The major oil companies won't do anything under a certain scale, and yet there's a tremendous amount of embedded energy in all that flared gas. The technology around gas separation at smaller scale has advanced remarkably. The markets in places like Nigeria and other parts of West Africa for energy products are substantial. So we think there's a great opportunity there. Is that reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Absolutely. Am I trying to get a single credit out of it? No. If somebody says I can get credits out of it, will I try to? Or will I shouldn't say I because it's not me, my investee, will he try to? Absolutely. We did the same thing in Southeast Asia. We saw a number of feed-in tariffs come in, and we funded a solar development platform for Indonesia and Malaysia. Was it because we were trying to get credits? Not particularly. We were looking at what the price of diesel-driven electricity in the outer islands of Indonesia was, and it was brain-dead stupid not to put in solar. I hate to say it, okay? But that's so we're looking for those niche opportunities in which the world has changed to some degree because of one of those various different factors: resource instability, technology advancement, or policy support. And we're taking guesses and we're taking bets. And yes, I would love to have perfect policy support for 20 years. That'd be lovely. It's not going to happen. I'm going to take the best guess I can, and I'm going to make a small bet that I can make incrementally larger over time according to the comfort level I have. I have a wife. She's not going to let me lose it all. So let me just sort of take a look at my notes, because I think the other point on this is, the way that there is absolutely staggering amounts of potential capital for doing what we're talking about here over the next 30 years. I did a quick sort of survey of essentially the market capitalization of real estate, oil, agriculture, and a couple other things. And roughly speaking, you're looking just in the public markets alone, not even talking about national companies, things like that. You're talking, at the low end, 10 trillion, at the high end, probably $50 trillion worth of assets, that very small fractions of change would, obviously looking at those numbers, would create enormous shifts in what we consider as possible. Now, so what we're seeing is, absolutely all of these institutional shifts around buying down risk in their various fashions are incredibly important. The other way you buy down risk is by having people that build good projects that people want to invest in, that they're not, reluctantly saying, oh God, this GEF is making me put money in this thing, I'm going to do it. No, that's not the way you have to find ways of essentially, I loved your term, you said incubating, incubating entrepreneurs in these markets to find those niches and to try to create, radical change in these markets. So we're just taking a shot with this. It's two family offices at this point. The other one is way bigger than mine. And we're just taking small, incremental, early stage bets, a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 there. But ultimately, each of those investments, each of those platforms, the ones that are successful, are going to create the absorptive capacity for tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, hopefully tens of billions of dollars at some point, of investment into these low carbon opportunities that are taking advantage of, as I say, a nexus of different trend lines that are occurring simultaneously. And, again, so our basic thing within this particular fund, and I have, other capital that is dedicated to more, as I say, the normal things, but this pool of capital, the first test is, does it help save carbon? Is it resource efficient? If it doesn't meet that test, someone else can invest in it. We don't want anything to do with that, okay? That still gives us a very, very large field of opportunities to go after. I'd like to make one final point about the capital markets and about that very large pool of capital I talked about just now. The other thing about that large pool of capital is that it is desperate right now for yield. The hunt for yield around the world is extraordinary, okay? Abid talked earlier about how people want to make sure they have liquidity and they want to make sure that they have particular cash returns, et cetera. That's fine. However, the world has changed. 5 years of quantitative easing has completely changed what the expected returns are on capital. I can tell you, every time I have a bond that matures, it's a fundamentally depressing moment in my life, okay? Because I know there is absolutely no way that investing in exactly the same instrument that I just got paid back on, I'm going to drop from a 5 or 6% yield to at best 1 to 1.5% yield. That is why, the capital markets and this large pool of capital is ultimately going to have to make some choices around what risks they're willing to take and what level of illiquidity they're willing to absorb for what period of time. And that's going to be, again, and as we start building out platforms that are able to create this, this absorptive capacity for capital, that's one of the things in this room to, as I say, every single spreadsheet I've ever seen for an energy project has a cost of capital of somewhere 10 to 12%. If anybody in this room can show me where I can get a risk-adjusted 10 or 12% return on money right now, I will literally hand you my entire portfolio tomorrow, okay? So this is why, that's a very substantial, disbenefit against highly capital-intensive projects, such as clean energy is, that, is a psychological barrier as much as anything else right now. And those are the things, those are the kind of things we need to change, and we're trying from the bottom up. All of these things from the top down are incredibly important as well. We all want to see, again, perfect capital markets, debt instruments that, can service 100% of the debt would be lovely. I can do that in my house in California right now. I could put a solar panel on my roof right now with no money down and, entirely financed by probably Abid, actually. So, I'll leave it at that. But, that's our approach is to try to bring the risk together from the other side of the equation as opposed to just talking about, where does the money go? We like to think it goes into the things that we're trying to invest in.
Thank you, Mark. Perhaps when Hugh Seeley was talking about the sort of erosion of a skills mix around the CDM as the markets have declined, he may not have been talking about Mark, but what I suspect is that the business model is there. I mean, you've created a new kind of entrepreneur who sees opportunities in a 2 to 4 year time frame and is prepared to make the most of it. And if carbon markets no longer provide that opportunity, they look for it elsewhere. And I suspect that's what is going to probably keep things going till we have clearer policy signals again. But my panel, I have to say, has been so efficient that we've got 10 minutes left for questions. So let's take a few questions. The people with the mics, please. I see one. I see one so far.
Thank you. Perfectly my language. Good to see the discussion going towards the SMEs and how. I would like to, say how you have handled the issues with regard to IP, with regard to intellectual property, trademarks, and copyrights, which is, which comes across with these innovating people, and how they want to scale up when their IP is at risk, and how you have actually helped them to overcome this hurdle. And in terms of supply chain management and greening of the supply chain and all that, there are certain issues which, like for example, we had a client who had was given the challenge of bringing down the energy consumption. This is a multilateral agency which is into soft drink dispensation, so we are looking at those refrigerators. He wanted an IP. They said you can have a check. What he did was that it was taking about 250 units of energy. He put it into 3 different categories because all the bottles need not be chilled at the same time. He converted it into lower energy, a little bit more and a little bit more, and then it came down to 135 units, but he was paid one single check, and he said, can I have 10 rupees per piece? And he said no. So how do you encourage such in your incubation center? And have you come across situations where these people do have good ideas, but because of their lack of funding, they actually look for a seed funding or a grant to start with, and then subsequently graduate to other modes of funding? And is your area of operation restricted to this part of the world, or do you come to Asia?
Well, stretching the IDB to Asia would be a bit of a stretch, but yeah. Would you like to respond on the
Yes.
IP side?
Well, thank you for your questions. I have to say that I might answer some of that, and for the other side, I might relate you to the person who actually designed the project, because I am the program coordinator of the microfinance one, and I can respond on how we are developing green finance product for the microfinance institutions, and if we had some problems across with the IP. However, I might say that my intuition is that with the greening of the supply chains, the project actually came from the fact that Walmart already had a sustainability process in line. So actually Walmart and FEMSA, that is a bottler of Coke in Mexico, do actually right now require from the MSMEs to have some sustainable type of behaviors. It's not very comprehensive, but it's the beginning. So what I can imagine, and for that I can relate you again to my colleague who actually designed the project, is that whatever was in place and was property of Walmart is property of Walmart. And what we can do is actually bring in more MSMEs, we can bring in also, and that's what we did in this project, the financial provider to actually bring the financing part for these initiatives to widespread. But regarding the IP in this specific case, I will relate you to my colleague, as I mentioned. For the microfinance institutions and other types of projects, what we do is actually that for the grant part, what we are doing with our grant part is helping the executing agencies, in this case, microfinance institutions, to develop this product. So we're basically, they're having the idea, but we're bringing in the funds. So, and our main mission is to replicate successful business cases. So in the legal agreements between them and us, what we do have is actually a very, very specific clause saying, if you produce a knowledge product that is funded with our funds, it will be the MIF property. And some of the clients might say, or some of the microfinance institutions in my case, or other executing agencies might say, we don't agree, this is our property and we don't want to share it. In that case, we're just saying, so we can't give you the money because it's free money and we're helping you develop and make this sustainable. What we actually totally respect is any databases, any list of clients, like the specifics like interior and private information from the executing agency per se. But on the product that we're helping develop and make sustainable, we actually require that if we provided the funds for that, we do have the property.
Thank you.
And I hope and it's the Inter-American Development Bank overall, so we are serving Latin America and the Caribbean. But our main purpose is actually find the business cases that can be replicated. And for the case of the Green Microfinance Facility, it's going to be replicated in Africa because of our partners, the Nordic Development Fund. So yes, we share, and we're looking for cross-collaboration, so yes.
There might also be some lessons from large corporates in the sense of, I mean, a generation ago with franchising, that's what they were doing with the whole sort of phasing out of ozone-depleting substances, where they were setting standards for their franchises. But did I see, Marcelo, a question at the back? Or is it only, there's one there, and then Dirk over here? We have time for 2 more questions, I'm sure. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. My name is Renat Heuberger, working for South Pole Carbon. I like David's overview a lot on the different players in climate finance, and it occurred to me that one group has kind of been forgotten, which is the smaller capital providers. We have been talking a lot about the big ones, the pension funds. But for those who you remember, Carbon Expo 4 years ago here in Barcelona, whoever had the booth here was flooded by people, by small family office, by private equity people asking, I want exposure. I want exposure to this market. Where can I get it? Those were people who had no idea about the topic really, but thought that this is emerging. This is going to move ahead, big scale. This now, I mean, we have people left like Mark, but very few of them. Very few people have the experience of Mark who can handle projects in West Africa, and that's a big shame. So my kind of comment more would be to whoever has some power to influence anything here, is to also think about granting access to smaller capital provider to make them be part of the climate finance exercise before they have all really turned away.
Someone from the panel would like to comment? Yeah.
Well, this is a very, very good point, and I think Avril mentioned an important product that I think gets into this issue, and she talked about Climate Scope, which is a way of measuring the environment for investment within the Latin American countries, which I believe is now going to be expanded through support of donors to other regions. You also have other tools and methodologies like the Ernst & Young Renewable Energy Investment Index. And I think, and certainly the Jeff is very interested if these indexes or other assessment methodologies to help document investment climate across the world might be very useful to smaller scale providers. Maybe they don't have a big research department of their own, but maybe if it's possible that we could develop some investment grade tools and indices, that this could be very valuable. And I'd be interested in feedback whether these type of tools might be beneficial.
By the way, I don't know if, yes, I brought some copies of this with me. So, well, you have it online, of course, but if you want to have a look, come look for me later on. I have like 8 to 10 copies for your information. Yeah,
Sure.
Good.
Thanks. Dirk, you have the next question, but before you ask your question, you might also want to tell us. Dirk is, of course, as many of you know, he heads up AITA here and has been our co-conspirator in bringing a lot of you into this room. So we owe him a vote of thanks for that as well. But you might also want to respond to that first question about who's going to show up at the expo tomorrow as a part of your question.
I certainly think, is this on? Yeah. We're anticipating a pretty decent crowd in spite of some of the challenging market circumstances. But I do think the feel of Carbon Expo is changing a bit to be less CDM focused and more focused on topics like those that we're talking through today. But I guess what I wanted to do maybe is take advantage of the fact that one of my AITA fellows, Mark, is up here to ask a question related to your background having been in carbon markets. And that is my general sense right now as I travel around the world working on this set of issues is that most places, if you talk to the guys that really have money, they think that climate finance starts with carbon markets. They definitely, that's where their headspace is immediately. Oh, you're talking about this thing that was a big thing in London, but now it's kind of on the wane, right? It's on the decline. And I'm trying to think about if I were a standing committee member, this is a great opportunity. I'm really glad that you guys have chosen to do this, to actually talk to the private sector about how can you get them attracted into the market, how can you get their money. I would be sort of looking at, it's almost like the tables should be turned here, that you should be doing the Dragon's Den dance here for us or something on how do we get more money out of a Mark Stewart, or more importantly, how do we get like 50,000 Mark Stewarts, or how do we get some guys that are Mark Stewart but on a much grander scale to commit more money into this market. And right now, I'm sad to say that I think most of them would look at what we're about here and say, this is a bit of a UN yawn thing. It's still kind of disconnected from the real world. It doesn't have enough of anything investable around it. So if you were advising the Standing Committee on Finance on what does it take to get more Mark Stewarts out there or more money out of large institutional investors, what's within their power to do that would help? And I'm happy to have the other innovators on the panel discuss that as well.
So first of all,
Mark, if you don't mind, we'll just close out by having, Ingo had a question,
sure.
I think. So why don't you ask your question and then we'll close with the panel's responses.
Is it on? Yes.
Yeah.
So my name is Ingo Pool. I also work for South Pole. I have a question and a comment about what Avril has said, and also to David. Yeah.
David.
So basically, the greening of the supply chain is something that we have done for over 3 years already. You know, like for it's a big Swiss supermarket chain, and they want to look at their supply chain. We call that insetting versus offsetting, you know, like finding reductions in there. And we're actually using a carbon credit framework to document our results, which we then basically, you know, like communicate back, and including all the way back to the customers of that supermarket, right? And the South Pole, we are a local organization. We're 100 people, but in 12 offices, right? So we are like an SME, right? And what we find difficult is interfacing with you guys, right? So it's a great initiative. It's fairly small, but we have shown it works. But how do we make it big, right? And we don't know how to go to you, right? So you talked a lot about like working with the big corporates, etc. And you mentioned, I was very encouraged by you, yes, you want to work with SMEs, but then I did not really understand which vehicle you're offering, right? So maybe it's my ignorance, you know, like, or you are under communicating, or this is an ongoing process. But you know, I think it would be very interesting to look at that from a like bottom-up kind of replication, you know, like at the end in German we say Kleinvieh macht auch Mist, you know, which means like even small animals produce a lot of, you know, and so let's continue this, you know, like to see is there something there. Thank you.
I'd suggest that you take the first question, and maybe we need to sit together at lunch to discuss the second one, because we are out of time.
So Dirk, first of all, I really don't appreciate you trying to crowd my trade. So that's not cool. What I would say, the fundamental issue around that we learned about the CDM is that policies that are not based on local demand and supply are much less stable. I mean, the reality is that trying to take an environmental commodity, shove it through a black box in Bonn, and bring it back somewhere else, when you start thinking about that way, is a very irrational way when you're trying to build up stakeholders to support these policies. In what I would say, what you want to do is you want to build. Everything should be about trying to get as many countries as possible to create long-term domestic policy frameworks that enable that kind of investment, okay? And for the donor community and the bank community, et cetera, whatever carrots and sticks they can use in terms of helping recipient countries, developing countries, to stick with those policies so that we can have investment stability over time, by far and away the most important thing. Because the notion of this sort of stateless, commodity of a CER is a very difficult thing to get, as I say, stakeholders to rally behind, in Malaysia or Thailand or Brazil or whatever. When you build out a feed-in tariff for one of those countries and you start creating developers that are making those projects, and all of a sudden there's a threat to the feed-in tariff, the local senator in Jakarta is getting the calls saying, hey, dude, I want my feed-in tariff back. So you have to start creating constituencies, and you don't do that via big international things where the only constituencies are frankly, international banks and multinationals, but are local people who have local issues, local jobs, local capabilities. That would be my number 1, 2, and 3 thing, is that local policies that can be deemed sustainable, and again, keeping a gun to people's head to make sure those policies don't shift, because as was mentioned this morning, when Spain pulled back the tariffs on solar a couple years ago, that was a massive issue, okay, everywhere, because everybody said, well, policies aren't stable, I can't do anything about it. Well, we're a little bit over that now, but that, absolutely.
So when you speak the truth, sooner or later you will be found out. I think that's, well, let me invite you to give the panel a hand for their discipline and their focus. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe lunch should be available outside. And do you have? And you're expected back here at 1:45. So please be as efficient about your lunch as you've been all morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.